Well, when I first got introduced to Mustard Seed Peace Project, I was a mentor for Engineers Without Borders and for the SIU Edwardsville student group. And at the time, their sponsor was Mustard Seed. And so I gradually got to know Terry a little bit. And of course, she started trolling my Facebook page. And my wife, ever vigilant, just looks at what I'm looking at on my computer and says, "Who's this woman that you're friends with on Facebook?" It turns out they went to high school together at Marquette. So even though I'm a long way from home, you've still got to watch out what you say and who you do, because it's a really small world. I think, okay. Mustard Seed Peace Project, even though it does have a slightly biblical reference for a name, we are a secular group. We are not anti-religious by any means, but there are a lot of religious-based organizations that work in the developing world, and we are simply not affiliated with any one particular religious organization. We are a nonprofit registered 501c3 group, and we're what is known as an NGO, a non-governmental organization, similar to what you have with the Rotary. It's based in Godfrey, which is where Terry lives, and they've been working in Guatemala since 2004. Is that in focus?
Not for me, it's not.
Okay, let me. Well, Terry's a little washed out there. Don't tell her I said that.
But it is better focused.
Okay. And the mission statement of Mustard Seed is that they empower communities by helping them develop sustainable programs in the areas of education, public health, and community development. And we aim to raise awareness of global needs through cross-cultural sharing. Now, one little fact that I wanted to bring out to you today is March 22nd. So, what is the anniversary? What is today? What is today known for?
William Shatner's birthday.
William Shatner's birthday. It's also the 55th anniversary of the Beatles' first single in the United States. Please, please me. But more important than that is why I'm here today. Today is World Water Day, which was established by the UN several years ago to highlight the global water shortage and problems, and is one of the main things that I'm working with as an engineer. Boy, this is really kind of washed out, and I'm sorry you can't see this any better. This is a map of Guatemala. It's about 2,000 miles straight south of where we are here in Illinois down to Guatemala City. And in Guatemala City, probably about 99% of the people that you will meet that have traveled to Guatemala never make it more than about 100 miles outside of Guatemala City. The area is known as the City of Eternal Spring. It's gorgeous. There's mountains, there's lakes, there's volcanoes. We don't work anywhere near that. We actually work 200 miles north of Guatemala City, right on the Mexican border, in an area known as Ixcan. And that 200 miles that it takes us, that 200 miles takes us about 10 to 12 hours to drive. It's all paved, but invariably every little town you go through, it's market day. You stop for countless cows, kids, pigs, chickens, you name it, and it just takes a long time to get up there. If you look at the yellow line at the right there, that is the Mexican border. We work in 3 communities: Los Mojares, San Alfonso, and Virginia. It looks like Virginia, but in Spanish it's pronounced as Virginia. We stay in a community called Playa Grande, which means the big beach, and there is no big beach anywhere near this. If you see, there's a big green patch down at the area, and that is a National Biosphere Reserve. So you can see the intact jungle of what it looks like in Central America. But all the way around it, you can see a lot of it. It's mostly green, but it's very rural. People are very poor. and mainly working in subsistence agriculture. Too bad you can't see the little picture up here, but here are just some facts about Ixcan, area of Guatemala. Now, Guatemala in general has about 6 million Mayans. And if anybody knows anything about Mayans, which most people don't, the first thing you might know is that Mel Gibson made a movie about the Mayans a few years ago called Apocalypto, which is it's a pretty graphic but historically accurate movie about the life of the Mayans in pre-Columbian times. But when we use the term Mayans, it actually refers to dozens of distinct languages and cultures. There is no one Mayan language. And while some of the languages may be similar to another, most of the people that speak one dialect cannot understand the other. Now people think about the Mayans, say, well, the Mayan civilization is dead. But if you think about it, think about the population of Ireland in comparison. Ireland has a population of about 4 million people, and we don't think about the Irish as being a dead civilization. But the issue with the Mayans is that most of them do not move very far. And most of the people in these communities live in and near the same communities where their ancestors have lived for over 5,000 years. Now, a lot of the parts that many people might be aware of when you think of Guatemala a few years back, you think about the civil conflict that they had. Their civil war, unlike ours, which only lasted 5 years, their civil war lasted 36 years. That resulted in, depending on the numbers, between 200,000 and 300,000 people dead and 50,000 to 60,000 people that simply disappeared in the middle of the night, usually by death squads. And today the area, because the peace accords were signed in 1996, the area is relatively peaceful. But what they're left with are small, isolated communities. Most of them have electricity, but like 98% of them do not have running water, sanitation, or anything like that. And as I mentioned, most of the people are subsistence farmers. So let's just look a little bit about the world that we live in today. And this is very typical of rural Guatemala. The last number I had was 748 million people lack clean water. The number I saw today, because it's World Water Day, is about 850 million lack access to clean water. 1.4 billion lack access to electricity. 2.5 billion people, billion with a B, lack adequate sanitation. And 2.7 billion people rely on biomass energy to cook. Now this is a lady named Alba. She cooks for us in one of the communities when we go down there. And every morning, one of her 6 kids gets up and goes out into the bush, which is right in back of her kitchen, and collects enough wood for today's cooking. Now, there is no such thing as dry wood down there, even in the dry season, and plus it's been gone for a long time. So you cut down any tree that you can burn. Now, there's 120 people, 120 families in this community that do the same thing every day, 365 days a year. So that's why using biomass to cook is an issue, because you see large parts of the forest which are gone, which we saw in that aerial photograph earlier. Now specifically in Ixcan, 81% of homes have no access to water. Less than 15% of the homes have electricity. 98% of the homes lack adequate sanitation. Now they may have a toilet, they may have an outhouse, but that outhouse just goes over the hill. Infant mortality is 5 times higher than it is in the United States. And 71% of the population lives in poverty or in extreme poverty. And by that we mean they live on less than $2 a day. So, let's look at some of the things, life in our communities. This was taken in January about 3 years ago. Many of the roads are bad, even in the dry season. The wet season is in what we refer to as summer. June, July, August. This was taken in January. So just because it's the dry season doesn't mean you're not going to get a lot of rain. It's a struggle every day to collect enough water for your family. The photograph on the right is outside of Alba's kitchen, where she collects rainwater that she uses for laundry and other non-potable uses. And if you can see a little more clearly in the photo on the right, you see women in the community that will walk down to the community wells up to 8 times a day to collect a few gallons of water, which they take back to their homes. And if they're lucky, and if they have the time, and if they have enough wood, they will boil it to try to purify it. And this is a photograph of a woman. I wish you could see it. This was from my last trip about a year ago. A woman collecting her day's worth of firewood, and she only has one shoe. So, you know, it's sad to say I don't know if she lost one or if she found one. But otherwise, if she didn't have it, she would have been out there barefoot collecting it anyway. This is something called a lavador. This is how you do your laundry if you are in these communities in Guatemala. It's basically a spring that is dammed up. You collect enough water, you have a flat rock on a pair of sawhorses, and you wet your clothes and you rub a little soap on them, and that's what you that's how you do your laundry. And that water, complete with all the dirt that you wash out of your clothes and with all of the soap, is what goes into the adjacent streams, which people downstream will collect their water from. So this is why it's very difficult for these communities to have access to clean water. Food can be scarce. Most people will live on tortillas and beans. Every morning in these communities, people will pay a few quetzals and they'll go down to a little shack where they will have their corn ground up with a little bit of water, and that is their day's supply of masa for tortillas. And they, like I say, most of the people grow their own corn and beans, and this is a small granary on the edge of town where people have collected the corn that they'll use in the coming weeks. This is what mustard seed is trying to do. The reason that mustard seed got started was primarily women's and children's health issues, and every year they have been able to take either nurses or in some case doctors and sometimes even dentists to go down and have screenings in the communities, because it is the children and the women who are chronically underserved in these communities. Another thing that mustard seed was able to do, it was a few years before Terry started going to these communities, before she realized that even though different types of foods may be limited, some people still did not have enough to eat. So one of the things that mustard seed was able to do was to buy a few acres of property just on the outside of town where the women could go and plant gardens, not just for themselves, but get together and plant areas where they could grow corn and beans and run a couple of cattle, and in that way help improve the food security in the village. 2 years ago, we went and we built a pila at the community school. Now, what is a pila? Well, it's basically just a multi-purpose washing station. You collect water off of the roof. It runs into a basin like this, and then you wash your clothes over here, and the water, even though it runs down just into the hill, at least you're not washing your laundry in the middle of the stream. So this was a big improvement that they really appreciated at the school. And then last year, we were able to do a project where we re-roofed and we painted the elementary school that was in the middle of the community. And we did this with students and faculty from Westminster University in Fulton, Missouri. Now these are future projects which we are currently working on and trying to raise some money. One of them are tabletop water purifiers, and I have one such example right here. One of these costs about $50, and what we are trying to do is we are trying to raise $10,000 to provide one water filter per family for 205 families that will allow the people in Los Bajaras and San Alfonso to have access to clean water, which they currently lack. Ultimately, in these communities, even though we are providing water filters right now, we want to be able to provide deep wells in these communities. This is nearby the community of Nuevas Ilusiones, where the Engineers Without Borders group from Peoria has drilled a well, and they have a rudimentary tank and distribution system, but at least it provides clean water. Even though the women still have to carry the water is clean. We also want to be able to provide composting latrines that don't contaminate groundwater. It doesn't depend on a leach like a septic tank, and basically provides free organic fertilizer to the community. The other thing we want to do is, even though it's latrines at the schools, and they might be composting latrines, most of the facilities, even with the old ones, don't have hand washing facilities for the students there. So we want to, in addition to providing latrines, we want to provide hand washing stations for the students, because gastrointestinal illness is one of the leading causes of infant mortality, not only in Guatemala, but in the developing world as well. Now, just a couple of photos for fun. These are some friends of ours that we have in the area. The guy with the parrots is a gentleman named Pablo, who I have known for 4 years, and is head of the water committee in the community of Virginia. But I say, we don't necessarily go to the pretty areas, but when we do have a couple of days off, last time we were down there, we hiked up the volcano Pacaya and roasted marshmallows. But roasting marshmallows on an active volcano isn't nearly as dangerous as it sounds, because you can always depend on your trusty dog to eat up any marshmallows that you drop. Every day ends with a football match with the little kids. These areas have 6 to 7% annual growth rate, which means they're going to double their population every 10 years. So there are a lot of kids, and they love to play football or soccer, whichever you're used to. Dogs are the same wherever you go. They're just always a little bit skinnier. The churches are beautiful. It's a weird mix of primarily Catholicism and the ancient Mayan beliefs in the underworld. But every little town you go to will probably have one Catholic church and one fundamental Christian church, like Pentecostal or Assembly of God. Like I say, it is a mix of Christianity and Mayan beliefs in the underworld, and you can still go to a lot of caves that are still actively used as Mayan worship sites. So in conclusion, I would just like to say Utz Maltiash, which is Quiche for thank you very much. And I have a couple of brochures up here if anyone is interested.